So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Nadim Zahawi's tax situation. It's gotten worse, like a lot worse, and it's escalated very quickly. So if we go over what the situation is, it's this from Sky News, pretty good. So Cabinet Minister Zahawi is facing questions about his links to a Gibraltar-based Balshore Investments and allegations of tax avoidance. He denies tax avoidance, but reached a settlement with HMRC after a careless but not deliberate error. And that's the thing he's ran with. He says it was a mistake, but it's a lot worse than you think. So blah blah blah, was a refugee. Questions about his financial affairs are now front and centre, having gained prominence during the time he became Chancellor of the Exchequer, a position he forced himself into. He strong-armed Johnson to take that position. So the allegation centre on his links to a Gibraltar-based trust, of which his father, Harith Zahawi, is a director. Nadim Zahawi co-founded the polling firm YouGov in May 2000. The trust was allocated shares in the company, equaling the number of shares given to the co-founder, Stephen Shakespeare. So the issue is that Zahawi claimed he was never... he nor his wife benefited from the Gibraltar Trust, but then we found out he got paid a significant amount of money, I believe, from that trust, and he did not pay tax on that amount. He claims that his father set it up abroad, the trust, because his father gave a lot of money for the startup of YouGov. Asked if he was a beneficiary of it, Zahawi denied it and claimed he was not tax avoiding, saying he set it up this way because his father lived abroad, which you could argue makes sense. But the fact that he never really got any advice over receiving the money from the trust doesn't make any sense. Again, he claims it was careless. But this is where it gets a lot worse, I think, in my opinion. So this from Robert Peston. It's extraordinary and unprecedented that Nadim Zahawi negotiated his multi-million pound tax settlement with HMRC whilst Chancellor of the Exchequer. So whilst this whole situation was going on, he was made Chancellor of the Exchequer, which in itself is very dodgy because there were red flags about it at the time. And so the question is, did he use his position as Chancellor to get a lower pay, maybe not necessarily a low amount of tax, but a lower fine, given that he was fined 30% of the amount? And because he settled, did he settle for less than the amount HMRC originally wanted him for? There's a lot of questions about this that we still don't have the answers to, and it's a shame. We've got this from Tom Larkin, confirmed that Nadim Zahawi did reach the HMRC settlement whilst he was Chancellor, so that is all confirmed. At the time, he had direct oversight over the taxman and the nation's finances. So it's very possible, and I'm not saying he did do this, but it's very possible that he maybe strong-armed HMRC a bit, or the people at HMRC feared that Nadim Zahawi could take retaliatory action against him if they tried to give him an excessive fine or a fine up to the normal amount. We don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know here, and that's the problem. Zahawi threatened the Independent with legal action if they covered this story. So this from about a week ago or a few days ago. Nadim Zahawi tried to stop the Independent exposing that he was investigated over his tax affairs by threatening to sue if they published. Zahawi, who was Chancellor at the time, repeated he paid all due taxes and would take legal action if they reported that he had been investigated. And this all happened over the last year's summer, let's not forget that. So he can argue he has paid all his taxes and he's up to date on it. The issue was there was a point where he wasn't. The Independent ignored his threats and published two reports detailing how Zahawi had faced inquiries from the Serious Fraud Office, the National Crime Agency, and HMRC. So it's not just the taxman that's involved here. He was investigated for fraud. Zahawi did not sue or complain to the newspaper over them publishing the story, and has now reportedly paid more than £1 million in a fine to HMRC in a settlement, and the total is about £5 million, about 4.8 million according to the BBC. And, it's important because Zahawi looks like he received £27 million and did not take advice from anyone, nor did he declare it from HMRC at the time he received the money. So he paid about £3.8 million in tax for £27 million that he received from this Gibraltar fund. And I don't know if that's the right amount of tax, I'll be honest, but I'm not an accountant. But the problem is he didn't declare it to anyone. It looks like he didn't speak to an accountant or anyone who has knowledge over this stuff. It looks like, and I'm being very careful with my wording here, it looks like he kind of kept it stum. He kept the story quiet. That's what it looks like according to these various different experts. And this guy, Dan Needle, he is investigating, or his organisation, the Tax Policy Association, are looking into multiple other MPs as well over their potential tax affairs. So this gentleman here doing very, very good work here, important stuff. But point being is that when you receive a significant chunk of money from an offshore trust, surely you should be consulting accountants about, do you have to pay tax on it? Because this whole situation has blown up really badly for Nadim Zahawi. We also have this story. So the founder of the Tax Policy Associates, Dan Needle, he claims he was threatened with libel by Nadim Zahawi if he had covered the story. So, clearly you have a government minister potentially avoiding tax, paying it in the end. But you got a situation where you had a government minister who received a significant amount in cash, right? We're talking £27 million. Sorry, I'm just getting a bit. He received about £27 million, did not seek any advice from any accountants, Nadim Zahawi, not a financial expert. And then on top of that, when people were going to cover the story about him, being basically fined by HMRC for not paying his taxes, he threatened to take legal action against them. So we have a minister not paying their tax on time, trying to avoid the tax, not declaring the money once they received it, and then threatening to sue journalists. Like, if you had done one of those things, you'd be in serious trouble. He's done multiple things that should have him sacked as the chairman of the Conservative Party. Multiple things here. Threatening journalists, etc. And, the Tories are now urging him to get it all out in the open, tell everyone exactly what happened and try and get rid of this, bury this story. Because if this is another situation where it gets drip fed to the public, similar to Partygate, it's going to be a disaster for the Conservative Party, especially when Rishi Sunak is promoting himself as the Conservative of integrity and honesty. It's not looking good for him right now. He's put himself in a very precarious position. And a key part of this story is the fact that Simon Case, right, who was the cabinet secretary at the time and still is, he was aware of this situation. So, with the Boris Johnson story, which we'll talk about today, hopefully, but with the Nadim Zahawi affair, the Simon Coates is left baffled at the role Simon Case played, who is still cabinet secretary. So he was aware of Johnson getting an £800 million loan window or loan guarantee, loan amount from someone who lives offshore. I think it's his Canadian cousin or something like that, which is a massive conflict of interest because who's funding that? Simon Case was aware of that. Simon Case was aware of this situation. I think they need to drag Simon Case in front of a select committee and ask them what exactly has he been asked about. Because his whole job is to make sure that there are no ethics violations and to warn the Prime Minister about potential ethics violations as well. We'll go over his role in a second. But you got James Cleverly saying he doesn't believe all politicians should be made to publish their tax returns. Wouldn't be fair to demand more from them than the public. Well, the issue is politicians have control over our taxes, so they can change tax laws to benefit them. Something potentially Nadim Zahawi could have done had he wanted to, given the power he had. He could have made changes and things like that. It's just ridiculous. But this is the role of the cabinet secretary, which is that includes the administration and provision of advice to cabinet and its subcommittees, administering the ministerial code, advising the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister on policy, process, and propriety. So he's meant to be there. Talking to the government in terms of making sure things like this do not happen, warning the government, warning the Prime Minister that, look, Nadim Zahawi has this case hanging over his head. He should not be made Chancellor, given the fact that it's a huge conflict of interest, given the fact that he has power over HMRC and other governmental agencies potentially investigating him. Chancellor of the Exchequer has control over the purse strings. And we're going to end on the fact that Rishi Sunak has asked his new ethics advisor, Solori Magnus, which Magnus is a cool surname, to investigate Nadim Zahawi's tax case, as there are open questions that need answering. So now, this coming off today, really, the January 23rd in the morning, he has, Sunak is asking his ethics advisor now, after about a week of this story being in the press, to finally investigate what has happened here, and is there anything that Zahawi was for hiding. It's not looking good for Nadim Zahawi. I think he needs to resign. He needs to resign very, very quickly from his position as chairman of the Conservative Party, because what he has done beyond the tax stuff, right? The fact that he didn't consult an expert, the fact that he did not consult an expert on his tax affairs despite receiving £27 million, right? That seems very, very odd to me. That seems very odd to me, especially because he received it from an offshore account. Do you not think that you should be paying tax on this money, given that it was given as shares to his father's company in Gibraltar? You know, these were founder shares, so maybe these shares were sold off. I don't know the exact situation there, where, you know, how this money came about. But the fact is, he should have declared it to an accountant, at least his own accountant, to, you know, to ask him should he declare it to HMRC. Is a bit ridiculous, to be honest. Sorry, this isn't the most the best scripted video. There was just a lot of tabs and a lot of information to kind of go through here. But point being is that he received money from a Gibraltar fund that his dad is the manager of. He claimed he was not a beneficiary of the fund, neither was his wife, and that he got paid £27 million from this trust in Gibraltar. Yeah, that doesn't seem right, does it? And, you know, I am a bit concerned, given that Nadim Zahawi has used the threat of legal action against multiple multiple people here. You've got him threatening the independent journalists. You've got him threatening Dan Needle. So it's very, very concerning that Nadim Zahawi, a government a cabinet member, you know, I don't know if the chairman of the Conservative Party would be classed as a minister, but a member of the cabinet here, threatening legal action against people who are covering a story which we know happened. And then now that these stories have been published, he did not take legal action. He used it as a threat, which is just tragic. And we know he's got money. He's got, you know, millions and millions of pounds in his account. He could hire very, very good lawyers and cause all sorts of problems for media outlets. And this is not what you want to see from a government official, especially not a cabinet minister. It's tragic, but clearly he's very, he knew how damaging the story would be. And yeah, what an absolute moron this guy is, honestly. Here's a tip for you guys, not financial advice though. If you receive large amounts of money from a trust, you should consult your accountant if you have one, or some sort of financial expert about should you pay tax. Do you have to declare it to HMRC? Because otherwise, you might get yourself in a situation like Zahawi where you didn't declare it, and then you've got to pay a fine. But my concern, one of my concerns with this story is, did he use his position as Chancellor to strong arm the other, to strong arm HMRC looking into him? Because he forced himself into that specific position. He forced himself into that specific position as a cabinet member. So that is very concerning. Very, very concerning, because he took that position, he became Chancellor, and then immediately straight after told Boris Johnson to resign. And whilst this was going on, he had this issue with HMRC. Very, very concerning. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully no breaking news comes out in the next 20-25 minutes. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.